Hey art therapist friends, welcome back to the channel. My name is Christine Testana, brand designer, here to help our therapists with developing their niche in their brand and business so they can build a community that values and appreciates the work that they do. So today we're going to be talking about mobile first design when it comes to user experience. So I want to really iterate this whole thought of desktop first, because we have moved away from that. And I want to address some of these myths around this idea of you have to design for desktop first, because again, we are always on the go. We're on our phones most of the time. So our attention has to be on the phones for designing efficient, seamless websites that have performance first. So let's go. So I really want to talk about the first myth in terms of the desktop dominance bliss. Why do we still move to that direction of designing for larger screens? Again, they look nice and they look pleasing on the eye, but I think we need to be more practical here because, as I mentioned, we as human beings nowadays are on the go constantly, and larger screens doesn't really matter now. It's actually more the focus of smaller screens that are more practical for on-the-go experiences. So now the focus is more of mobile experiences when it comes to designing a website, an app, etc. So I really want you to focus your energy more on mobile website designs and less on the desktop. And I'm not saying that to completely exclude it, but your focus should be first designing for the phone. Because when you're designing for the phone, then obviously it's going to look still pretty well on the desktop. And this is called responsive design. And responsive design just means that when you're designing anything for the web, that it can adjust when going small to when going large. And that makes things a whole lot easier when designing in general, because you're kind of establishing more of a universal design when the design is being adjusted to a small screen to a larger screen. We have to remember that most of us are accessing things through the phone than any other device. So be mindful of that when designing, because I do see online that there's still people that are selling website templates, but they're only showing the desktop version of the websites. And that has me head scratching to say, no, we really should be focusing on phone versions first, because that's what's essential right now. Everyone's going to the phones. And if there's problems with those templates being functional on the phones, then I would question buying any of those templates, because they're not mobile first focused designs. And that's something that is essential nowadays. To talk about the next point here in terms of myth number 2 is that, we really need to focus on less on the larger screens, because that doesn't matter. Because when we're designing, the myth here is people still believe that we have to design for computer screens, but we just don't do that now. Now we have to establish more principles, because the myth here is that whatever looks good on the website part of on the computer will still look great on the phone. And my myth there is absolutely not, because the phone version has different approaches and there's different principles that come with designing on the phone. And I'll share a couple of examples. So I'm going to draw this out to make this a lot easier. So let's just say we have a website, right? Simple website. You got the logo up in the corner, and then you have the menu bar, and then a beautiful banner image with maybe like a call to action button. Okay, so you have that long-wise, right? Landscape. Now, when we're designing for the phone, you don't really have that option, right? So here's your phone. It's a completely different interactive experience. So the principles that are applied here on a desktop screen, computer screen, is certainly different than the phone. The phone has less space to show. So when you're designing here, you might actually have to remove this banner. Who knows, right? Because your logo will still need to fit. Maybe it's up in the right corner, or maybe it's in the center. But these common principles change on the phones because you have to accommodate for interactions with your finger when you're touching the buttons, or maybe when you're scrolling. So there's different functionality per different screens. So when it comes to the menu, of course, your menu is going to be shrinking down into 3 lines up in the corner. And I'm sure you've seen that, right? And that's just called a stacked menu. So when you click on that menu, it's going to give you the full menu, right? And compared to here where you just click, right? So there's more that you have to think about on the phone. And in that image banner, you have to make this button probably 10 times to 2 times bigger on the phone so it has enough room for a finger to press the button. And then here's maybe your banner image with some text. So you have to accommodate for different screens. And when you're designing for the phone first, I feel like this is the essential foundation. And then when you go to the desktop, it's going to be much easier to design for the desktop. I would focus your energy here on the phone because this is where everyone goes to. And you have to remember the different behaviors that people would take on a phone, because whatever you do on the phone is different. You're clicking with a mouse on this desktop version, where on the phone you're tapping. So you're tapping and scrolling. So that's what I mean when it comes to designing for mobile first. So when you get this perfected, this will be easy. And if it's a responsive website, this would automatically stretch out to this design for the most part. That's why I say focus on the phone first. Next part I want to talk about in terms of myth number 3 is that the user experience doesn't matter. Well, it actually does, because again, your website is talking to a person, right? This isn't just making a website because it looks great and to make sure it looks nice. It has to function properly, or else people are just going to see it as just an aesthetic and not so much as a practical tool. So when it comes to really caring about user experience and its challenges, you really want to look at navigation, the loading times, and how your information is being spread out across the page. Those are all essential points to start. And when you look at each of those pieces, you need to ask yourself, you know, can this be better? You know, am I really improving this area, or can it be done better? Those are some things to ask yourself, because let's just say if you ask a family member or a friend to navigate your website, and I would recommend that you do ask a friend or maybe one of your clients to navigate your website. they will give you the honest responses that you need to give you the direction of how to create a really good experience for your people. And they'll give you honest feedback. They'll just say, this navigation bar seems very confusing. When you hear that, that means that you need to simplify your navigation system. So that gives you a stepping stone of what you need to do there. Now, in terms of loading times, they will for sure tell you, this is too slow. Can you change this a little bit? And when it comes to loading times, there's definitely things to look for. Obviously, your pictures, because that essentially is usually the problem, is that you load really big pictures that really don't need to be that big. And you can size them exactly to how you need them. And this is called optimization, which just means that you are optimizing for the web and not saving out as a really, really high resolution image. You just need it just enough that it's working favorably in the space that you need it. Now, another thing to look for is also the responsive design. As I mentioned before, when your design is being stretched upon each of the different devices, you want to make sure that each of your elements, so aka buttons, images, text boxes, navigation, menu bars, making sure all of those are behaving right on each screen. Because I've seen some websites in the past where for some reason, when it's loaded on the computer, sometimes the menu bar goes into the phone version of the menu bar. And then when they go to the actual phone, it's the other way around. It has the computer version of the menu on the phone, which is not very helpful because it's swapped. So look at each of your elements, making sure that each are working for the right screen. And this is all detailed oriented things, but being very attentive to those elements will really help to spot anything that is out of place. Okay, so I'm now going to share with you 5 key takeaways that you can bring with you to your design for your website. So obviously the very first one is about the user behavior shift. So you need to recognize that users nowadays are using their phones more than ever. So when it comes to designing your website, be sure to do the phone first, then your computer desktop. If you want to design for iPad, I would leave that one as a third wheel, because what's really essential is the phone, and then the computer as maybe the second one. The iPad is very, very rare, but that people do use it. It's really going to depend on your ideal. The second takeaway here is responsive design is non-negotiable, which means that you can't just design only for your screen, only for the computer screens, the larger screens. You really need to understand that when it comes to responsive design, that you ensure that your website is flexible, that it can bend to certain degrees to meet each screen size and look good on each screen size. So that's a non-negotiable. It has to behave to each screen, whatever it's being displayed on. That's so key and important here. This is all around functionality and ensuring that the experience is seamless and effortless on each device. And another takeaway here is performance matters. Again, tapping back into the overall functionality. The aesthetics will always be there. It's always going to look nice with its colors and fonts, etc. Now it's about performance though, because that's what people really care about. They really care that when they jump on a website, it's super easy to navigate, it loads quick, they'll get their information they need, and that's it, then they're done. But if it's slow, the website's slow, people are not going to go back to it. So to ensure that your website is running super fast, I would look to Google Analytics to hook up your website with Google Analytics to run a test on your website to see if you have to adjust your images or any plugins that are on your website that are taking up a lot of loading time. You might have to change some of your plugins. So plugins examples could be like maybe a shopping plugin where maybe you put in a shop on your website. Sometimes that might be a problem because it takes up a lot of space. Or maybe you have like a chatbot plugin that could take up space on your website as well. So you might have to make adjustments there depending on how much storage you have on your server of your website, but that gets really technical. So we won't touch that right now. For now, this is about just how can you make your website much more faster in loading. And usually it's images and videos that take up a lot of the loading time. So if you can adjust any of those elements, that will make a great step into making your website more faster. And my next takeaway here for you is being sure that everything is thumb friendly. And what I mean by the thumb friendly is that because we're designing for the phones, you really have to remember that they're not going to be using a mouse to click anything on the mobile phone. So you have to really prioritize our fingers, our thumbs, how big our fingers are, how big do the buttons have to be when pressing anything on the website. So ensure that that is a priority. And even in your navigation menu, make sure the navigation, is stackable and can expand on your phone so that they could tap whatever they need to tap in the menu. It makes it a whole lot easier, less frustrating, and they're not clicking, the wrong link to go to. Again, we're trying to relieve any stress when it comes to navigating. And my last one here for you to just bring it home is to test. Because again, your website is never going to be done. I'm going to tell you that. You're going to need to continue to reach out to your ideal clients, maybe a family member, to test your website. Test the forms that you put on your websites. Test your shopping carts. Test your videos that are on there. Test maybe the readability. Test how the images are being loaded. All of this matters. You have to continue to test, and do this on a quarterly basis because you never know what could change within the quarter of your website. Who knows, right? So doing those tests every once in a while really helps to improve the performance of your website, and hence performance matters to all users that are hopping onto your website, diving into your content, and collecting value, right? That's all that they're looking for is value. But if they can't get to the value because, things aren't optimized properly or they're not designed properly, then obviously that's unfortunately a customer that you have lost, right? So those are things to really take into account. So those are the greatest takeaways that I have for you today when it comes to designing for mobile first. If you have any additional questions, you can leave them in the comments box below and I'll get to them as soon as I can. So again, thank you for listening and for sitting through that, and hope that you can take some of these takeaways with you and start implementing a mobile first website for your brand today. So again, thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful day. Bye.